Hi. So the first phase of the hero's journey is this call to adventure. And I was listening to the Hero's Two Journeys by Christopher Vogler and Michael Haig recently, and they were saying the first part of the journey, this is based on script writing. You show the hero in the first 10 minutes in their life, and there's a big problem that the viewer sees and the hero doesn't see. So this is an interesting thing because that's the time to sweep in and have some call to adventure happen. The call to adventure is some sort of ethical crisis or something happens that keeps pulling them out of that comfort zone, requiring them to change their fundamental inner mechanics, as Jung would say, to self-realize, to become something that was not defined by the exterior world. So to live more out of your essence, whereas you had been defined by your personality and by what was imposed on you and by your traumas and by what was implanted, etc. So it's interesting because that's when one would sweep in the fictional film world. We usually wait till someone has already heeded the call to adventure or declined the call multiple times. And that's when this healing journey happens, because you wouldn't reach out to someone if you were sitting in your life unaware that there was an issue. You start to get a little inkling that there's an issue. However, you need some sort of crash, some sort of explosion. And for me, it was breaking my neck. That was one explosion. Earlier, I hadn't achieved anything. There was a sort of a spontaneous awakening that happened to me on a beach. And I experienced like non-duality and this, I looked through the eyes of a being that would never die, the soul, the spirit. And the reason that didn't anchor in very well is because it was spontaneous. Like, it didn't require a lot of work. Now, I had sat in meditation for years and such. However, I didn't think of it as something that was based on my labor, like A plus B equals C. So it didn't really anchor in. And some years later, I broke my neck. Boom. And that's the explosion that I needed. Now, isn't it interesting how we tell stories? Like, you could say, why did this happen to me? Why did I have to go through this past? And the truth is, it didn't happen to you. You're running your mind through this perception of what happened. And it's nothing like what actually happened. Do you realize that? So that's the first key. It didn't happen like that. That's not a realistic story. If you were composing your life as a screenplay, I'd say that screenplay kind of sucks. It doesn't. It's not building the drama. Your chapter now doesn't have you forced to change. There's not a pull toward evolving. You're just stuck because you're oversimplifying the hero and victim roles. Like, you were a victimizer too, and your victimizer was also a hero, and vice versa, this subtle gradient. Otherwise, you're caught in this simplistic world of archetypes. Like, look at Darth Vader at the end of Star Wars. At the end of the first trilogy, becomes kind of a nice guy, right? Like, okay. So you have to see the nice guy in your villains in order to flush them out enough to heal things. And to see the nice person, you have to kind of let out a furnace of rage toward that energy, that archetype, that clears out, that creates a clearing where then you're like, oh, now I can actually see things as they were. As they were, as they are, that's the Buddhist highest attainment. Life as it is. Because we're programmed in all these ways, you know. You're not seeing life as it is. You're seeing life as you've been taught that it is. You look at a tree, what you know about biology and what you know about aesthetics, that's all painted upon that tree. Like, if you become a gardener and there's some sort of disease that plagues a certain tree, like there's a ash beetle here, you could look at an ash and be like, oh, that's food for the beetles. So these are all stories that we're carrying like that. And we have stories about men and we have stories about women. So life as it is like seeing through your own stories and just realizing where you're caught up in things that aren't serving you and aren't true. Are you caught up in things that aren't true? Of course. You have to be. You definitely are. Look at all these political beliefs. People adhering, like someone wants to help someone. And people want to see other people helping someone. So if there's a story that so-and-so's beating someone or so-and-so's oppressing someone, then that person that witnesses that is like, oh man, that person's horrible. However, that's not the story. You're seeing the story is the screen. So the important thing to remind yourself is, oh, in this story, of course I'm siding with the victim. And I also acknowledge that this is a story. Like, I don't want to be a racist, so I'm siding with the people that don't want to be racist in this story, right? So everything's this overlaid screen here, overlaying your world. Because you could talk to someone who is oppressing someone else, and you go talk to them like, I wasn't trying to oppress them, this is just how I was raised, right? Or whatever equivalent. And then you start to expand that, and that starts to grow. Like, there's the seed of God and divinity in everyone. I've had clients who are like, there's no divinity in me. And then we touch into that point, and they're like, oh, there is. Like, I was scared to acknowledge it. And that's more realistic. So if that's you, and that's her, and that's them, that's everyone. So a more fruitful inquiry is, how can I awaken the divinity in this person? And it's not preaching, obviously, doesn't do it for most people, though there are some gifted preachers. Usually it's setting an example by your compassionate actions. And that's the way you break people out of things. And it's like, the person that's the pariah, you go give them something, you take their hand, you sit and have a conversation, and then someone around them like, ooh, that person's disturbing. They start to see, oh, that part of me I was disturbed with, and I was projecting it out there, right? So there's beauty in the world, there's a spirit, there's like the seed of a soul. Like Gurdjieff thought we weren't born with a soul. He thought that Christianity, that piece of Christianity was corrupted. He thought you're born with the seed of a soul, and you start to cultivate that through certain levels of action and awareness. And once you cultivated that, it was that thing that would last forever. That thing that I experienced through my eyes when I was on that seashore. And what it was I was walking with my father with this movie camera, this 16 millimeter Bolex from the 70s, and this woman ran by, and my father and I were walking, and she seemed beautiful. She was in a hoodie. She walked, it was a misty kind of afternoon, and there was a certain sun glinting on the water. And then the water washed up and washed away her footprints. And that metaphor of we pass by and leave nothing, paradoxically made me aware that there's a piece that never goes away. So there was this thing that wasn't quite a voice, it was an awareness that was like, I will never die. And I was relating this to my friend in Korea, and we were having like a little bit of a language barrier. But he said he experienced the same walking up all these stairs on a mountain to a temple in one of those sacred sites. And he said the voice in his mind was, you have never been born. So we each brought our indoctrination, culture, and programming onto this epiphany, which might be the same. It might be the same awareness of the same source, and we're labeling it differently based on what our religious traditions were. You know, it's possible that one was accurate and one was skewed. Like he was more Buddhist in his awarenesses, and I was more in this culture that's Christian, though I grew up not Christian. And so we came together on that plane, and there was this light in our eyes, and we realized, oh, this is someone that has shared a similar experience to me. That's super rare. That's beautiful. And there are people that have things in common with us everywhere. We tend to only ask the ones that have the same like kind of shirt as us, or they're at the same kind of gathering, they have the same, they went to the same college, or they're alumni somewhere. That's because we're programmed to do that, to keep separate. When I was younger, everyone that was an artist. I'm like, that's cool, you're an artist too. And then when we went to grad school, everyone's an artist. So you start to fragment again. Oh, you're an abstract artist, I'm a figurative artist. Oh, you're a conceptual artist, I'm a sculptor. Oh, you're a painter, right? And everyone was fragmented again, because that's how we were trained to do. So this is an invitation to untrain yourself. And that's what all this work is about. Laying down these projections, getting to know what's you and what's them, and really honing in on what you need to do to live as your best self, and what we need to do collectively to paint the most epic and beautiful world we can. So again, I'm Stephen Budden. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you again soon.